could all put yourselves on mute, that'd be appreciated, just so there's no extra noise. And then just like we did with the recording, if you could use the raise hand function, if you have a question, I will call on you, and then I think I'll have the ability to unmute you, and then I'll ask you to speak and ask your question. Just please, we have two people on the line here. It's Mick Hoffman, our WIAA Executive Director, and Greg Whitmore, who is the WIAA Executive Board President, and also the Athletic Director at Lynn Ritzville Sprague High School. So please make sure you identify who you'd like to answer your question. So I figured I'd start it off, and just to add a little more context to the announcement that we released, if Mick and Greg, if you guys could both maybe just add a little bit more about how we got to the decision and maybe the process that it went through, and then maybe why that decision was made.
You bet. So like Casey said, my name is Mick Hoffman. I'm the Executive Director of the WIAA, and I'd like to first begin by thanking all of you for being here. You know, we have great passion for what we do, and for the opportunity we have to work with our students and our schools and our communities, and to see the level of interest of people coming on a Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to some type of Zoom press conference that we're making up as we go along really tells a lot about our community and the value that you see as well. The way we got here, obviously, is we got hit with this pandemic back in March, and I can't even begin to put a number to the number of contingency plans staff has developed in partnership with our board and membership. Most recently, what we decided as we were getting ready for the 2021 school year is, first and foremost, we absolutely want to provide opportunity for our students. We understand how incredibly important education-based athletic and activities are. There's a lot of research out there on our website, the NFHS website. Recently, the University of Wisconsin has come out with a study that they did based on the spring experience of students missing out on the opportunity to participate. So we have been working diligently to try to find a way. What we did in the last few weeks, historically how we got here, was the board made a decision in June that three plans. The first one was to start in August as scheduled. The second one was to start in September, 5th and 7th, where we were at until today. And then the third one was to start all sports and activities in January. Was it June 7th? Help me out here. 14th, maybe, I can't remember. I can't keep track of dates. Our last meeting, the board made the decision at really the request of some superintendents who are on our board to push that date to September. And the reason being that trying to figure out how we're going to open schools. We anticipate some significant announcements this week on the start of schools. Schools are having to decide what they're going to do as far as in-person, hybrid, or all online. And as they were trying to navigate that, in addition to figure out how to offer athletic and activities, out of courtesy to them and really for us, we need to know what schools are doing. The date was pushed back to the September 5-7 start date. Once that was decided, then we went to work on what does this look like if we start in 5-7. At the same time, we've seen the surge, not just in Washington, but across the country in cases. And if we were going to be unable to start on September 5-7, what are other opportunities we could provide students? So we pulled together a committee. It had superintendents, it had district administrators, it had building administrators, it had building athletic directors, and it had coaches, as well as board members and staff. And we developed the two plans that were released today. Again, please understand it's an incredibly fluid situation. Where we're at now could change tomorrow. It could change. We literally, during the meeting, we were notified about the possibility of several schools making announcements about online learning. And so because this is happening so incredibly fast, we want to make sure we're giving information for schools to plan, but also make sure everybody understands that when you look at dates, those are definitely written in pencil. So today we brought forward the two options from the committee, and I'll turn it over to Greg, our board president, to talk about the conversation and how we came to a decision.
Thanks, Mick. Yeah, again, I'm Greg Whitmore, Executive Board President. I'm the Athletic Director at Lynn-Ritzville High School. I also teach and head football coach, so I bring a few different perspectives to it. I represent a 13-person board without going into WIAA 101, but there's 13 board members representing all districts in the state and all students. Going back to March, you know, our goal when we were writing this playbook, which, you know, no one has that playbook, even though, as I reiterated to our board, this is actually the second pandemic that we've been through. We were established in 1905, and obviously the Spanish flu 1918 hit, but we couldn't find minutes back then how to handle the pandemic. So we're rewriting the playbook. And the whole goal during March was to hold on as long as we could to spring sports and make decisions. And in the end, obviously, we had to make that excruciating decision to cancel spring sports. And it's not lost on us how much spring sports kids, coaches, parents lost in that. Normally, our last meeting is June 7th, WIA meeting. That would have been my last meeting as a WIA president, but we continued to meet weekly and bi-weekly, and the focus became obviously on fall sports. And again, the whole goal, knowing all of us having, you know, recognized the value of athletics in our kids' world and their education and in their mental health, it becomes a balancing act of how do we keep kids safe and how do we obviously take care of the mental health aspect of it by offering athletics. So that was our focus all year. And obviously we're at the mercy of COVID and science and some of our guidelines put to us by the state, Department of Health, the governor, OSPI. We're working, obviously, we know that the decisions we make impact a lot of kids, a lot of coaches, a lot of districts. And so what we really focus on is making decisions on what we know. And I think today was kind of an example of that. We all felt, and I can't say we know anything for sure, but I don't think there was anyone in the boardroom, or at least on our Zoom call or virtual boardroom, that felt we could get the high-risk sport of football played this fall. We're just not in a position, doesn't look like the state of COVID and everything else was going to be allow us to do that. Volleyball, the same thing. As you can see in our season one, we've kept some low, what are characterized or categorized as low risk sports as options. And we know those are in great peril too. A lot of things have to happen in our favor in order for those to happen. And so we discussed that, but we decided to provide some clarity for our member schools, our athletic directors, our leagues, our districts, our superintendents that are trying to reopen their schools and decide what they're doing. We wanted to provide that clarity, and that's why we made the decision to postpone football and volleyball and soccer to the spring. So with that being said, it is excruciating to us to postpone or cancel, certainly, and we're going to do all we can to maintain all the sports and provide opportunities. We know it may involve some rule changes at times. We'll have to be flexible. And so as Mick said, all those dates and that calendar, while it does provide a visual for you of a framework of what we're looking at, it by no means is set in stone. We're just going to have the flexibility to roll with whatever the state of COVID is and the guidelines put upon us in this state. So yeah, and I appreciate you all being here. I think there's 80 people on here. I recognize a lot of names. It's nice to see the faces with it. And I know you have a lot of questions. And one thing I do know that we won't have all the answers tonight, but we'll do the best we can. And certainly some of the questions you ask may be ones that we haven't thought of, but and we'll work hard in the next week. In fact, we've just scheduled another board meeting 1 week from today to set some some criteria, kind of some benchmarks for what do we have to meet. What are some criteria we're going to follow to decide if we can pull off cross country and girls swim and slow pitch softball? How many, for instance, how many counties have to be in phase 3? You know, how many schools, how many student athletes are affected? So we'll work diligently. I can't say enough about our staff, the WIAA staff, Mick Hoffman, his leadership, and our staff in times when they're supposed to be on vacation. Our staff and our board as well. It is unbelievable the work they've gone to. And so our decision today actually provides them some clarity as well. And they'll go right to work. They have tonight already forming some more contingency plans and setting some dates and thinking forward. So with that, Casey, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. We will open it up to questions. So like I said, if you could use that raise hand function, I will try to get to as many as we can here.
Hey,
so
Casey, just before we start, another point of clarity that may be a question. You're hearing about these low, moderate, and high risk. So if you haven't been on our app, WIAA Live, there's quite a bit of information on there. So we would highly recommend that. That is a outstanding source to get our most current information. How these sports and activities are determined, that came from the National Federation of High Schools SMAC committee. Their Sports Medicine Advisory Committee made the initial recommendations. We took their recommendations, we melded those with Governor Inslee's, and then we submitted them to the governor's office and the Department of Health. We are under the guidelines of the Department of Health. So essentially, for us to be able to offer one of the low-risk sports, which are the one for the fall are the ones listed on that document, the county has to be in phase 3 for them to be able to compete. For a moderate sport to be able to compete, you have to be in phase 4. And for the high risk, which is football, wrestling, competitive cheer, competitive dance, wind instruments, solo ensemble, you have to be a phase 4 plus, and phase 4 plus has yet to be determined. And so with 22 of our 39 counties in phase 2 or 1.5, and we're frozen till July 28th, it made the September 5-7 for anything other than low risk sports challenge. So I get the question several times a day, who determines these things? The medical people determine it. It's not Greg Whitmore, Mick Hoffman, or Casey Johnson sitting around an office doing these things. It's the medical professionals and the scientists who are doing that. So I want to make sure people understand, you know, the rules we're playing by, and then we're trying to craft our guidelines to those. Thanks, Casey.
Yeah, thanks, Mick. So we'll go with Nathan Joyce. I'll unmute you here and you can ask your question.
Hey, thanks, guys. Hey, so if I'm reading this calendar right, it looks like there's a break in November and December. Could you speak to that and kind of what the plan is and why that decision was made?
Who would be the best one to send you, Mick?
Either Greg or Nick.
I'll take first shot at Greg, and you correct me. He's the press, so I got to be careful here. The reason is that one, we wanted to have some flexibility in that fall, with that being the biggest unknown, that if for some reason we could or needed to push what's planned for the fall, some of that's weather dependent as you get towards the end of the season. The second item is what we're seeing with a lot of colleges and other entities, the anticipation of when we go back indoors and the general flu season and then back indoors, that we could see a spike. And so what we didn't want to do was get kids playing in the midst of their season and then miss out, similar to what we saw in the winter with some states with their culminating events. So it was a cautious approach, give us some flexibility in the fall, but also have the ability to pivot and provide a full opportunity if we're not able to start on time. So.
No, that's great. And I would just reiterate that's where our dates are tentative as well. You know, if things are looking much better by that time, we could even possibly push some pre-practice for that winter season, season 2, a little bit earlier. But yeah, we need to just do whatever we can to provide some flexibility for our board to make some decisions at last minute.
All right, thanks.
Let's go to Eric Grandstrom.
Hey guys, thanks for doing this. Thanks for taking the time here this evening. I just wanted to go back to something that the WIAA came out earlier and said that you'd push forward with plans whether there was in-person learning or not. Are you still sticking to that plan with this new schedule, depending on what happens with the districts across the state?
Eric, appreciate that question. That's obviously one that we don't have an answer for exactly. We're going to put it in place, but we also have superintendents on our executive board, and we asked them that question: how comfortable would they be in maybe allowing some of these sports, even if they're having online learning as their model? And the answer they gave us was that it might be mixed, depend on the district and that. So that's some of the metrics or the benchmarks we will that'll be a part of. If we don't have enough schools willing to, say, do cross country, whether they're in phase 3 and whether they're online or a hybrid, if they're not willing to do cross country, we'll take that into account, and that would whatever benchmark we come up with, and we haven't come up with those, we'll work this week in committee work to do that. But we know the superintendents, on their initial reaction would be, no, we can't do that. But we also know that there's some possibilities, there's some differences between that. And if we can get kids out doing some healthy things that superintendents can feel comfortable with, that'd be great. But we're not sure, but appreciate that question.
Okay, let's go to Paul Beatty.
Hi, guys.
Hey,
Can
Paul.
you hear me? There we go. There we go. Thanks, you guys, for doing this. I appreciate the time here. Something just came out actually just about 2 hours before this here in Lewis County. Lewis County Health came out with a news release that canceled all youth tournaments in the county of teams coming in. Now, the teams in Lewis County can still play each other, which sets up the question, if indeed we can't have statewide competitions in golf and something else, is the WIAA open to allowing 2 teams in the same county if they can go out and golf against each other, or if they can run a cross-country meet or something like that? Or is it flexible enough to do things like that for these schools that may be able to do something?
So one of the things our board is going to address moving forward is the out of season. So typically our out of season, once the spring sports end until August 1st, it's pretty much wide open for schools. It's up to schools to determine their level of activity. The board has already made the decision to allow that to go forward until August 19th this year. Now, depending on what we end up being able to offer in the fall, will determine how far we push that. So if we end up starting as planned right now with that August or September 7th date, that may not change. If we end up not being able to offer a full slate or a majority of our schools, that could change as well. So that's the planning process we're in the midst of now that we have the framework for seasons. I don't know if that answers your question or not, Paul, but that's the best we have right now.
Well, it just sounds like you're leaving open the flexibility of, again, playing the hand that you're continuing to be dealt, so to speak.
Right. And other challenges, some school districts have contractual obligations with coaches, and so they're limited to certain numbers of weeks. You have some coaches who are maybe in the high risk and aren't available. You have some, if school districts are closed in person, they may not allow coaches to come back and work with kids. So there's a lot of those kind of questions we need answered by our superintendents. We got answers in the spring. Some of those have changed, and so now we're going to go back and revisit those.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Paul, you're right. Our philosophy from the board from the get-go has really been to not necessarily create one size fits all. In other words, if we can't in King County play because of the phase they're in, or Adams County where I'm at, phase 2, we're not necessarily just going to say that if you're in phase 3 in the county next door that you can't participate in some sort of sports. But again, we'll set some benchmarks. We want to do anything we can that gets kids out moving again, but obviously keeping them safe.
Okay. we'll go to Brenna Green.
Hello. I just wanted to know how communicative Jay Inslee's office has been with you guys through this process.
I can answer that one. His education liaison has been fantastic. We text or email on a very regular basis, as has the Department of Health. Department of Health has been a little more challenging lately with the number of furloughs, but Governor Inslee's office has been really good to work with. They haven't always been able to get to a decision that we're looking for as we press them with everything else going on, knowing education-based activities are one of many things they're working on, but they have been very communicative, and we appreciate that.
All right, let's go to Rebecca Pettengill.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. My question has to do with the financial responsibility of the schools, because a lot of these schools, depending on their size, rely on like the money and revenue they make from competitions, like especially in football and stuff like that, to support their different sporting teams. Of course, a lot of them have funds for it, but especially with social distancing, it might require additional equipment that they don't initially have the budget for. Has the WIAA looked into anything to like financially support or alternative ways for schools to make money to continue sports with all of the additional costs it might have?
Well, Rebecca, it's a tough question. You're right. The financial piece is a huge part to all our considerations, both within our association, and we know member schools, and we know there are different levels all over the state of ability to pay and that sort of thing. At this time, I can tell you we have not looked into any ways that we can support schools financially, other than being aware that football, basketball, especially, and volleyball, those are your revenue sports. And so we know that kind of adds another piece to maybe the urgency to have some sort of season that way, because I know as the athletic director at Lynn Ritzville, if we can't have football, we're going to struggle for a couple of years to get our ASB budget back up. And so, yeah, we haven't, as the board or staff, focus in that. I think that's going to be something certainly that will be a topic of discussion at the district level, league level, even how our districts and our leagues can support their schools and their league. But it is a very important piece.
It also leads us to a question that's probably coming regarding what will postseason look like, which at this point we don't know. But part of the initial conversation has been that maybe we have more regionalized or sectionalized championships to allow more teams to play. And if this is a year where we give out 5 state volleyball or 6 state volleyball 4A championships, then so be it. Because one, it will limit travel, which with the virus is a strategy. And then the other piece is that we could help eliminate some overnight or long trips, which are very costly for schools. So part of the planning will take that into consideration. Another important piece for people to understand is that extra educational-based athletics on average across the country is less than 2% of a school district's budget. And so even though it seems like it's a significant cost, the reality of it in comparison to most other things, it is a pretty small piece. That being said, it also is pretty much self-generating through ticket sales, as is the WIAA. So it is a challenge, and what we will do is as we push forward, we'll find those partners out there that maybe can help schools, whether they're regional partners for regional schools or statewide. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Armin.
Hey guys, thanks for taking the time tonight. Just by looking at that calendar, it looks like football season, let's say, is only about 6 regular season weeks long, and everything else is also shortened. Is the plan then for the entire year, no matter the sport, to go league only and just cut out all non-league games?
Did you guys hear that? The audio was a little low for me, but did you catch that? You got it?
I think so. I think the question was, or is the intent to reduce the number of contests in a season and maybe go all eliminate non-conference. I guess it depends on your league makeup and that sort of thing. We, as we put this together, and we will further develop and get it out to athletic directors, they will know how long their season, when their season begins, and they will also know when they have to, in order for us to have a postseason, they'll know when they have to have their qualifying teams to the WIAA, so we can put them into whatever that bracket may be, and it may not look the same. So yeah, at this point, all the seasons are shortened, and then the task will be really put on leagues. For instance, my league, football-wise, has 11 teams, and so we're going to have to eliminate some league games, right? So how do we do that will be a challenge, and that would be a lot up to the leagues to do that. But we will give them the starting date and when we need their qualifying team to be placed into a postseason tournament. Did that answer your question, Armin?
It did. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. How about Tim Booth?
Evening, guys. Mick, I know when we talked a few weeks ago, you had talked about the collaboration with your colleagues in California and kind of coming up with this sort of altered schedule idea. One of the things that they did when they announced yesterday was they waived the rule about club competition and school competition for athletes in the same season. Are you guys to that point yet of determining whether that your similar rule will be waived, or is that a conversation still to come?
Now, right now, we don't deny students from doing club sports at the same time as a school sport. What we don't allow is special accommodations, meaning a student can miss practice or be allowed to leave early every day. They have to be fully committed to their school program first and foremost. Questions we do need to answer are, will we allow a student to do 2 sports at one time, right? And so, that's another decision the board has to make. And if so, what does that look like? What are the limitations? Because again, health and safety. So we'll go to our SMAC, which again is Sports Medicine Advisory. So yeah, there's a lot of rules that will need to be reviewed. The state of Washington's always been very careful to try to minimize overlap and give kids as much opportunity to compete in as many different activities as possible. And this creates a significant challenge for that. But we have great thinkers on our board. Greg's very complimentary of our staff, and that's the other thing it's important for people to understand. We gave him a hard time today. He set the record for board meetings. Normally, I think we have 5, maybe 6 a year. I think I don't even know. We've probably had 14 or 15 at least. They were meeting every other week. And so we're going to continue that pace through the summer to iron out those kind of details. So again, we don't deny the club sports. It's just that they need to work around the school sport.
Okay. Is it Femi? Oh,
Thanks, sir.
all right.
Appreciate it. My question is for Mick. We talked last week, and I asked you about spectators, if parents would be able to watch their kids play. Now that the fall sports schedule has changed and it's mainly outdoor sports with the exception of the girls swim and diving, do you foresee spectators, whether it be parents or friends of the student athletes, being able to see these competitions?
We hope so. And again, that's where the Department of Health is going to give us those guidelines. And so they've been pretty clear with the physical distancing and masks. And if we can get our arms around this recent outbreak or surge, I would fully anticipate that they're going to allow that. Also, the sports that we're offering in the fall, at least, do lend themselves to outdoor spacing. So that was another reason the board was really targeting outdoor sports. It gives us more flexibility for parents. It's important for kids to play in front of the people who love them. So we want to provide that opportunity.
And I will say too, just to clarify, some of you will see an asterisk by the girls swim and dive, and the girls swim and dive has been labeled as a low risk sport, and yet we're still trying to find clarification from the Department of Health and some of the indoor and outdoor pools whether they will actually allow swim and dive to occur in phase 3. So that's why we have an asterisk for that. We have to have more information on that before we can really determine whether that can get started, but we hope to get that information soon.
Okay. We'll go to Alyssa Charleston.
Hi there. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Hi, Alyssa.
Hi. Thank you for doing this, first of all. I'm curious, I know this will probably limit 2-sport or 3-sport athletes. So do you guys have any kind of statement regarding, football players that run track in the spring and how that kind of affects multi-sport athletes?
Yeah. Well, one of our goals is to not force athletes to choose between two of the sports we offer, but we know there's going to be some overlap, and that's why we know we're going to have to be flexible both at our level and probably districts to allow a student athlete to choose both sports at the same time. How that would work, it's not easy to go to a football practice and then go out and do some track practicing. So it's not going to be a perfect world. And we know we may get to that point when a student athlete has to choose whether it's their number one sport, their favorite sport, or whatever. We hope to not get to that point, but we know the overlap will cause that, and that's why we'll have to be flexible with our rules to allow that to happen. And of course, we're going to have to put a lot of trust in coaches, school districts, but certainly athletic directors and coaches to do that in a safe way. But we want kids to be able to participate in every sport that they want to, if it can humanly be done.
And Alyssa, I would add, I'm hoping we'll have some 4-sport athletes if we can institute this plan, the initial plan, because there's 4 seasons. And with the overlaps, we've tried to limit that as much as possible. But a student, we currently have in our rules where practices from a previous season can count towards pre-participation in their next one. And so coming out late isn't necessarily the end of the world or eliminating an opportunity. So we're actually adding a season, even though they're shorter, we're offering more. And so we might have our first 4-sport athlete in a while, which would be pretty cool.
Okay, Dave Nichols.
Of course, I'm going to go to worst case scenario here. What happens if we get to September and A, kids aren't in school, and B, the state's gone back to phase 1? Is there any thought to planning ahead under those scenarios?
Yeah, well, the next option would be to move those fall sports to that season 3 with the other traditional fall sports, and hope for the best. We would, then go to what we call option 3, which is everything starts in January. And if there become changes beyond that, then we're in scramble mode. That's all I can tell you. We don't have a contingency plan if this thing lasts well into January and some of those winter sports can't. But our philosophy is going to remain the same. We're going to try to get those opportunities for kids. So if we can't get started with those sports listed in season 1, that doesn't mean their hope is lost. We're going to do all we can to get those put in the spring. It's just going to make the job a little bit tougher.
Thanks.
Yeah, and Dave, if you look at seasons 2, 3, and 4, they're basically grouped by traditional seasons anyway. And so season 3 is mostly what it would be our traditional fall sports. So that's what Greg is saying. You could slide the season 1 into season 3. And Greg is so hopeful that this Oxford vaccine is going to come through. He's buying us all Oxford sweatshirts when it does. So,
right.
Okay, we'll go back to Eric Grandstrom. Thanks for waiting.
You bet. First of all, I don't envy your guys' position to try to juggle all of the scheduling and everything else that's involved in this. And I appreciate your flexibility and everybody's turning to you for answers that you don't have and trying to do your best. So it's very much appreciated. Being a former football official myself with the Chelan County Association, I know that the local association is full of a bunch of guys that are in that upper age bracket, and that's probably the case for a lot of associations across the state, not just football, but all officials. So I'm curious from that angle what your discussion has been with the WOA on trying to get officials in a position where you can actually have these games to begin with.
Yeah, Eric, that's great. And Todd Stordahl, the executive director of the WOA, is in our board meetings. And so we rely on him a lot. In an initial survey, I guess, that he put out to his membership, was that 30%, possibly up to 30% of the officials would not feel comfortable officiating a game right now under the current situation. So we know we're not flush with officials as it is, and you cut 30% out of the pool, that's problematic. And then when you talk about overlapping some sports, some of these officials officiate some of those sports that would be overlapped. And so we know that's going to be a huge issue. It's one that, working with Todd, we have a great relationship with the WIAA, and we know, or we're confident that we can, with creative scheduling and everything else, that we can overcome that. But we know there'll be problems for sure.
Okay, we have some more hands raised. I'm not sure we're going to get through all these, but I told these guys I'd try to keep it at 30, 40 minutes, and we're about there, but we'll keep going a little bit longer here. Let's go Micah Chen.
Hello, my question's for Greg. It is expected to be football players that leave the state to play football in another state this fall. Are those players allowed to come back and play in this full season in the springtime as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we, as we make these decisions, then we immediately turn to a what if we start seeing some students, what if Idaho keeps football season open? We have some schools that are to play in Oregon this year. We have a Washington school that's combined with a 8-man school in Idaho. So how does that change? And so we haven't answered those questions yet, Micah. There's, again, some things we probably haven't even thought about. But we're going to have to rule on those at some point. We're going to just have to, do the best we can and take those situations as they come and try to make a decision that's best for the entire state and not just the individual. But transfer eligibility is always an issue that we deal with the WIAA, and this will just make that a little bit more of a challenge. But we'll just have to kind of deal with that as it comes. But good point.
Okay, let's go to Patrick Quinn.
I apologize if this has been addressed already, but when a player tests positive, how will that be addressed, and how will testing be? How will that happen?
Department of Health has said that if we have a positive test of a participant, a player, coach, official, anybody who was in close contact will need to quarantine for 14 days. So it could conceivably remove teams from competition if that would happen. As far as testing, we don't have a testing program. We heard about some schools that are spending, some of our Division I schools that are spending over $250,000 a week on testing. None of our schools or the association has that kind of funding. So if there's a positive test, at this point, it would require quarantine of anybody close. Department of Health would go in with their tracker, and they would determine who those folks are, and then make a determination on who would be allowed to play. So it'll be a case-by-case situation.
Okay, Jamie Council.
Hello.
Hi.
From a safety aspect, as far as physically for these athletes with shortened seasons, with having 4, they might not have enough time to get ready to get, for football, make sure that they're tackling right if they're trying to finish up another season, if they're finishing up this season instead of maybe training the right way. Is there any discussion going on about how to keep the athletes safe when it comes to their safety on the field when you're going between multiple sports?
Yeah, absolutely. Safety is the first thing we talk about, and we're very lucky to have a SMAC committee, Sports Medicine Advisory Committee, that we run almost everything having to do with, especially with practices and preparing, heat illness, anything that talks about the safety of our athletes, concussions, you name it, anything medical or safety issues. And so if we were to be asked or contemplate reducing the number of, say, preseason practices of football from 12 to 8, we would only do that if the Sports Medicine Advisory Council would approve it. And so, yeah, we're not going to sacrifice safety. We do know we'd have to put quite a bit of trust and maybe even some guidelines out to coaches and ADs saying, hey, obviously we're in unprecedented times. You have more student athletes, maybe first time you've had student athletes doing both sports. Understand that you can't, really work them out so hard in this practice because they're going to follow up with another practice in 2 hours or in the evening or whatever. So yeah, we do take that under consideration, Jamie, and that will be a constant that we will have the SMAC committee on speed dial to help us make those tough decisions.
In just a little more detail. So our SMAC committee, some of the doctors who are on there, they come out of the University of Washington and Seattle Children's. They work with the Seahawks, the University of Washington programs. They're the trainers from throughout the state. And we are still requiring the same pre-participation physical requirement. We're not extending those. So that is still mandatory. The trainers, we have over almost 1,400 coaches in our school this week doing virtual as well in the morning. And the presentation today was, one was specifically on how do you get students ready, getting information out to schools, knowing that they may not be as active as they have been in the past. So make adjustments as you're entering into the season. And so there's been a lot of information being shared. We've updated our heat acclimatization program. And so we're very confident that that side of it is there. It's really more making sure students are practicing safe habits, that they don't share any viruses. So.
Okay, we're gonna go to these last two questions here with your hands raised, and then we'll get out of here. We'll go to Brenna Green.
Okay, I was just gonna say too, I know we're getting short of time, and some of you are having a hard time finding the hand up button, but please put your questions in the chat. We need to hear these questions and we want to answer them. So make sure if you don't get to ask us a direct question, get that in the chat and we'll have that recorded and we can get those addressed.
Yep. Okay, Brenna Green.
I just wanted to ask a clarification question. I know that it says in fall sports that golf and tennis have been moved to those times, but then they're also popping up again in summer sports. So are you planning on having them being played and the fall and the summer phases for sports? Or I guess spring, whatever you want to call it, the fourth phase.
Yeah, they currently are offered as they're spring sports, but the schools have the option of doing their league and qualifying events in the fall, with the understanding the state tournaments in the spring. So that's why they're listed like that. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and for the last question, let's go to Paul Beatty.
All right, guys, one last question here regarding fall sports and how it is regarding the current fall sports that are on. How about schools that may not have cross country or golf, but now do they have time? Can they actually put a team together? If they don't, I think especially some of the smaller schools that may have kids that want to go out and do something and participate, but the school just doesn't have that sport. And is it too late for them to put something together if the school wants to move forward with that and just so they can create a competitive environment in hopes that it happens this fall?
Well, I'll let Mick follow up with this in a second. My first inkling is largely that's going to be a district decision to start a new sport. I'm speaking in our district. If we all of a sudden want to start up a fall golf season, or we do have a cross country team, but if we wanted to just say slow pitch softball, for instance, we'd have to act pretty fast, and our board would have to agree to it. There'd be a ton of work. I'm not saying it can't be done or that wouldn't be allowed. I don't know how many schools would partake in that. As far as the association is concerned, though, Mick?
Yeah, we're hoping we have we have a record number of cross country. I mean, how great would it be to get a football defensive line out there running as a group? And so that would be a great problem to have. We might have I got a text today asking if we're going to have a heavyweight division for cross country. I said, absolutely, let's do it. So schools have the ability to add these as they want. And again, it would actually help us from association perspective, because then we could even stay more in that regionalized, sectionalized competitions towards the end. Keeps teams from traveling, keeps them playing against kids in their own area. So the idea of the travel and transfer is less. So yeah, we're hopeful that more schools pick up some of these sports that maybe they haven't done, or kids try something they haven't done before. So.
You may have wanted to see the defensive lineman run cross country, Mick. I want to see him tee it up on the golf course and see how that goes.
That's my golf swing, Paul.
I've seen a few questions about middle school. I'll be honest with you. We have not addressed middle school very much. We know there's a lot of need to do that, and we will get to that. But yeah, that's a great question. But for the most part, it would be the same restrictions. I mean, obviously football, I'm assuming they're all going to be the same level of risk and everything else. So, but we have not really gotten to the middle school part of the piece.
And going to the question about shortened games, we would not require that as an association. But for those of you who aren't real familiar with the WIAA structure, leagues have a lot more latitude. So they could do exactly like what David is suggesting in there. And some of them were talking about doing that back in the spring if they were allowed to play. So again, schools will be, they have their number of matches, games, etc. that are allowed under our rules. How they do that is up to them to be creative. So, and the question about testing, we won't require testing. But there is a questionnaire every day students are going to be asked. So again, yes, it's the honor system. We do know some schools are going out trying to procure thermal temperature takers. I don't know, whatever the term is, help me out. But where they can just shoot kids' foreheads coming in. There's cameras coming out that some schools are looking at that when people walk into your building, it will screen and take your temperature, and also alarm if somebody's not wearing a mask. And so there's some technology that's evolving through this really quickly. We're not requiring any of that other than to say, hey, ask your kids, have you had a fever? Have you been around anybody sick? Do you have any of these? And that they track that daily. And yes, their coaches will probably most likely be the ones having to do that. So there's going to be a lot more responsibility on coaches.
Okay. Well, thank you all again for being here. Again, like I opened, we're just trying to be open and transparent and hopefully add a little more context to the announcement that came out earlier today. I'm sure we didn't answer all your questions, but feel free to get in touch with me. I'm your best point of contact for the WIAA, and I'll drop my email in the chat if anyone needs to follow up with me. But yeah, again, thank you. I mean, this is always going to be a fluid situation, and we'll adapt accordingly and keep you guys updated accordingly and keep going. So anything from Greg or Mick to sign off?
Just thank you all again. Appreciate it. Tough times. I know your world is upside down as well as everyone else is. And I know you're kind of on the same page in your world of sports and everything else. You have the same philosophy. We want to get kids back in school, back on the field, on the court, as quick as we can. And that's that balancing act. And we're going to do all we can from the executive board level to see that that happens.
We can't wait till you're grilling us about a decision about the placement of a tournament or a rule change or something else, because that means kids are back playing, and that's a good thing, and we'll stand up and take it then too. So, but we do appreciate your interest in what we're trying to do and helping get the word out to people so they understand. So thank you for your time tonight.
And one last note, for anyone who wasn't able to record this, I've recorded this to our Zoom account, so I should have that later tonight. If you need it for any reason, I'll have an audio file and a video file. So feel free to reach out to me if you weren't able to record but you need it. So other than that, thank you all for being here, and we'll see you down the road.